Maestro here from the Bendu Lightsaber Combat. Today we're continuing our discussion on the theory of defense as it pertains to Soresu. This is the second out of the in our coverage of the process of defense. What we're going to talk about today is the actual cycle of the process of defense and some of those specific interferences that can inhibit you from the proper application of the process of defense. So what any process of defense has to start with by definition is some aggressive stimulus, whether it's the opponent attacking, whether it's your boss yelling at you, whether it's a car pulls out in front of you, any type you're defending yourself, whether it's in combat or just in life in general. There's always going to be some aggressive stimuli or stimulus that kicks off this process in yourself. So what is the next step in this? Once that aggressive stimulus is going to happen, it's outside of you. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not you're aware of it. So the first step is to be aware of it. We have the sensorial stage or the perception. So we have an aggressive stimulus which leads us into perception. If that perception is good and clear and we do perceive the threat, then we move into the next stage, which is the evaluation decision stage. So we go from perception, perceiving the danger, to evaluating and making a decision about how we're going to react or not react to that stimulus. Once we've gone through that in an ideal process, we come to the resolution. And if the first two have been successful, clear, and uninhibited, then the resolution, by definition, will be a positive one for us. Okay, so we looked at the optimum process. Now let's look at what an impaired process looks like. The first one is the way we want things to go. Free, uninterrupted, clear. This example will show what happens, a diagram of what happens the way we don't want things to be. That aggressive stimuli will still be coming in, regardless of whether we're aware of it or not. If we're not aware of it or we have a bad evaluation decision-making stage, something is inhibiting us. We are impaired in some way. This impairment comes through what we call interferences. So these interferences interfere with our ability to correctly and cleanly move through these phases in the process of defense. And what that will lead to is, as I stated a little bit before, we will have a reaction that isn't appropriate, that's either too weak or it's too overpowering, which either one can lead to problems. It will be inappropriate because we're not looking at the situation clearly. We're not judging properly. Something is interfering with our ability to do that. So what are the interferences and how can we avoid falling victim to them? Okay, so talking about the interferences to our process of defense, what are they and what are they doing to us that's causing us to be inappropriate in our reaction to whatever that aggressive stimuli is? The interferences come in one of two sort of realms. They can be internal interferences or they can be external interferences. They can be completely housed within ourselves, they can be subjective, or they can come from outside of us, they can be objective. All interferences are going to be one of those two things. They're either coming from us or they're coming from outside and affecting us. All right, so for the interior interferences, they can come in one of two ways. They can be intellectual interferences, meaning that we have some sort of ignorance as to what's going on or about the situation that's stopping us from knowing how to proceed correctly or appropriately in that situation. Neophytes, new people in lightsaber combat, run into this quite a bit. They have an intellectual interference, something they don't have a lot of knowledge to draw on or experience to draw on to make appropriate decisions. That's why training is so important. And that's the answer to an intellectual problem, is knowledge. We want to gain as much knowledge as we can. We want to experiment. We want to practice. We want to try new things. We want to get instruction from reliable sources that we trust. That's the simple solution for any intellectual interference. The second type of interference that's internal, I did not spell that right. Can be emotional interference. That means that even though I know what the right thing to do is, I don't have an intellectual interference about this. This aggressive action comes in at me, even though I know exactly what to do. I practice it hundreds of times. That guy just looks too scary. He's freaking me out, man. And I have an emotional reaction. Maybe it's that he's scaring me. Maybe it's something not to do with him at all. Maybe I'm just depressed that day or worried about something else, in my mind. I'm thinking about my bills or my children or my dog has rabies or something like that. And it's worrying me and it's causing emotional interferences. It's clouding my judgment in my mind so that I can't make good evaluation decision. Sometimes it will even distract me from the perception of that danger. But this is the other type of internal interference that you can run into. All right, so let's move over to external interferences. These are interferences outside of the mind, outside of the self. These are objective interferences. And there are two, just as there are two intellectual ones. And these can be either physical or environmental. So an example of a physical interference would be if someone tries to attack me and I go to block and he's just a lot stronger than I am, bringing a lot more leverage and power to bear in his attack, and he smashes right through my guard and he strikes me. That's an example of the resolution being affected by a physical interference, a physical deficiency. But that's not the only example of a physical interference. Another physical interference could be maybe I wasn't very wise and I didn't get enough potassium that day and I'm fighting and my muscles get really fatigued and oxygen deprived. And I know the right thing to do, I'm trying to do it, but I just can't get there fast enough, I just can't move right because I didn't take care of my body nutritionally. That's another example of a physical interference. An environmental interference would be something like maybe I'm not wearing appropriate clothing and I attempt to turn or step or move and my clothing is tight or draped and I step on it or something like that and it interferes with what I'm trying to do. Or very simply, another environmental factor could be, an interference could be that it's pitch black in the room. I'm being attacked in the dark and I can't see my opponent. If I could see him, I don't have any intellectual or emotional problem dealing with his attack. I don't have any physical problem dealing with his attack, but I can't see it. I don't know where it's coming from, and so I get that dagger in the back. So these are examples of external or objective interferences in the process of defense.